So we have, I'm really excited about this panel because now we get to hear from CPG, transportation, and distribution right now. But first, before we do that, I want to introduce Brian Johnson. He's not a stranger to many people in this room because he's a Bentonvilleite, right? And so Brian comes to the university now after 8 years? 8 years. Eight years with Gartner. And I wanted to specifically talk about his role as a Director of Corporate Relations for the Department of Supply Chain Management and helping and coming along the SCMRC and really helping us engage with corporations in a much more meaningful and broader way. And so many of you are going to get to know Brian very well, particularly as SCMRC members, and those of you who want to connect with the center. This is the first contact that you need to make now. And so we're really excited and welcome Brian. He's going to be facilitating this panel here.
All right, let's go. Thank you. There. John. Cory. There he is. Thanks for hanging out there.
For those that had on your bingo card that a 1984 graduate of the U of A who didn't even, not only did I not have a cum laude next to my name, I'm not even sure I knew anybody that was a cum laude, that I would come work for the university at the supply chain colleges. You win if you had that on your bingo card, because even my mother wouldn't have voted for that. But it's a super honor to be part of the U of A and the supply chain college. Once again, how great is it to see it ranked as the #1 college in the nation for supply chain, and super glad to be a part of that. But today we have a super fun group, and I kind of defaulted into supply chain. So I'd love for you to introduce yourself, but also tell me, how did you end up in supply chain?
All right, good afternoon. My name is Cory Knox. I work for P&G. I was a chemical engineer, and I started my career at a manufacturing plant in North Carolina. And I was only in operations for 3 or 4 years when my boss brought me into a room and asked me if I would be the logistics manager for the plant. And I was incredibly offended by that suggestion because, I had dreamed of being a plant manager and always running operations. And it felt certainly off course, but I also saw other people who had done that work, and they seemed like people who couldn't cut it. And I thought that was the implication. But, the reality was, even back then, we were facing some of the same problems: inventory through the roof, poor service, and he saw me as an innovator and asked me to do that work. And so fast forward, I've done this work for a lot of years and tons of locations all over the U.S. and outside. And then about 5 years ago, I was having a conversation about, and I was running a control tower for North America for all of our categories. And I was talking about some of the biggest losses in supply, and I said, they're really at the seams of the supply chain between P&G and a retailer or us and a carrier. And the next day, the person came back and said, "Congratulations, you're going to Fayetteville, Arkansas to work with the largest retailer." And I've been here for 5 years, so that's how I got here.
That's great.
Hi there, I'm Jennifer Shorkey. So my start in the supply chain, I like to joke, I've been with Walmart for a very long time now with RJW. But when I started with Walmart, I like to joke because I was in supply chain, and I like to say that Walmart would drive until the radio station died, and that's where they would put a distribution center, Chris, right? So always in these little small towns. And so I started with Walmart back in 1995 in a store. So worked there as a cashier. So that's where I started in supply chain, spent roughly 27 years with the company in various different capacities. And through last September, went over to RJW and now have responsibilities over there for all of compliance within the company. So been through lots of different roles with Walmart, but I'm very proud to be at RJW as well.
Good afternoon, my name is John Joyce. I work at ArcBest. I'm the Director of Enterprise Development there. Funny story, I got involved in supply chain because my brother-in-law needed me to load trucks. So next thing I know, I was getting involved in kind of the freight transportation aspect, and spent the next 30 years getting more involved in more customer-facing type of engagements with our customers, and have gone through various levels of transportation, mainly in the LTL space, but into freight forwarding, international freight forwarding. And then 7 years ago, I was asked to come up to not Northwest Arkansas, but Fort Smith, Arkansas.
Close enough.
Close enough, yeah. And joined the ArcBest team, where I kind of have taken all of those elements of experience and helped design solutions for customers that we're engaging with at the corporate level, at the enterprise level.
That's awesome. What a great team of like following the product. And as I watched Chris's video, right, it was so cool to just see the products just come off of the truck and zoom into the warehouse. But we know that before that, that is like all of you guys, right? Like it looks so great on the video, but in reality, there's a ton of work to make that happen, a ton as we move to this omni-channel automation and that. And how has that impacted you? What have you seen the key changes being as you go down that direction? Maybe we'll start with the product in the middle and then the end, and then we'll throw it in Chris as a big old warehouse.
Yeah, I'll try to answer that in maybe a couple of ways. First, when Rod was speaking earlier, it really resonated with me. I mean, everybody knows who P&G is, and we're a pretty big marketer, and so retail media networks is something we're using very heavily to shape demand. So I will talk about that. But the other thing I would say is when I think about demand in general and how we respond to the changing demand, it's not just the consumer behavior that's changed dramatically. It's exactly how that demand is sourced and how it's fulfilled ultimately, and it's changed dramatically, and will continue to do so. And I'm approaching that, or we are approaching that in a couple of ways. One, and you and I had this conversation before. I talked about the purpose of the portfolio and how we use the portfolio of products. We make thousands and thousands of SKUs. Over time, it's gone up and it's come down, right? We get a big kick on simplification, and then 5 years ago, it was like personalization, so we need more. I do think we're in an era where it's going to be coming down a bit for lots of reasons, and sourcing and fulfilling is one of those reasons. Exactly how the product gets to the consumer is another reason. Let me share an example. So, 5 years ago, everything followed the same path ultimately to the consumer from us. Where we are right now, there's a large and growing part of our portfolio that our largest retailer here will never touch. All right, so we're taking it out of the FCs, out of the stores. It's offered only on the app, but it's fulfilled by P&G. So like drop ship, for example, it's exploding for us. We're adding that capabilities. From an inventory or demand planning standpoint, it's much simplified, obviously, because I've got very few places in the supply chain where that SKU will exist. But that's just one example of how we're responding. And clearly, there's a lot we're doing on automation. When I see the automation, we were chatting over lunch about SQEP, and I won't say too much, but I am a believer in it. And there's a lot we're doing to enable Walmart's automation to come to life, whether it's electronic signals we're sending, whether it's just very common things like labeling, but more.
Yeah, so that's a great segue. So before I left Walmart, I had responsibility for all of quality for the ambient network. At that point, I'm afraid to have stones thrown at me or whatever, but I was responsible for kind of the birth of SQEP and the team, being a part of that team. My specific responsibilities were teaching and training all of the quality inspectors within that network so that they were inspecting consistently, and we had great results coming out of them. So fast forward now, I think about where I'm at RJW, and our customer base is largely that smaller to medium-sized CPG customer. And so not only do they have the demands of raw materials and forecasting and supply, demand, warehousing, transportation, all of these different ways pulling them, there's also the need to label your case correctly. Make sure you have 2 labels on the case. Make sure you've got descriptions on the case. Make sure that you're creating your pallet correctly, shipping correctly. All these new requirements that I understand them. They're very, very important. Obviously, I have a little bit of eat what you cook, right, on my side now, on the compliance side of it and owning it. But all that to say, there's lots of different ways that suppliers are pulled in many different ways. And so from a compliance standpoint, my single focus is to, first and foremost, educate our customers and suppliers on how to meet all of those. But then I also work really hard to mitigate the fines in the first place. So how do we, in our space, continue to educate them, but also remove all the barriers so that the loads that we ship out on behalf of our customers are compliant?
Yeah, I think just kind of touching on your drop ship comment, that's the one thing that as I've engaged with a lot of customers over the last 3 years specifically, things have changed quite a bit. But during that COVID period, we saw not only the drop ship increase, but even setting up quick changes in the supply chain to where you were talking about drop shipping maybe 40, 50 containers into a port that they had never serviced before because we couldn't get capacity at the other ports. So having, I'm seeing a lot of that in kind of demand, in the demand forecasting and the changes of that product coming in. It's not as, especially in the last 3 years, it's not as clean as it used to be. I think that we're probably not out of those woods yet. I think we're going to see that probably through the rest of this year. And potentially some clients, as we're talking to them, as part of their design that they want to implement moving forward, it's to basically incorporate that as a standard, not something that is continually going to one channel or one particular direction. So we're definitely having to come up with alternatives and be able to pivot into those alternatives to support that change in demand.
That's awesome. And so I'm going to throw this out because I kind of know what this will create some great conversation. So is there a driver shortage when you think about transportation and what's going on there? Because that's what everybody's reading about. That's what people are talking about. Anybody have an opinion on that?
Yeah, I do. I do. If I go back a couple of years ago, right, because everybody was talking about that thing, like there are not enough drivers in the U.S. It's a major bottleneck for the supply chain. I didn't think that was true, but that's what I was hearing. And I reached out to somebody who was doing a study at MIT on the issue. And he had, at that time, was just about to publish this study. And it was on that. So he was asked, do we have a driver shortage, yes or no? And the answer confirmed what I thought. I mean, his study concluded with what I believe to be true, which was no, we don't have a shortage. We have a complete waste of driver's time. In the U.S., on average, a driver wastes 4 hours per day, either waiting for a pickup or waiting for a drop-off. And the reason for that is a very archaic methodology for scheduling those appointments. And I'm going to talk through this a bit more because we've done some innovation in this space, but for all of the startups, like there's a problem and I still don't think it's been completely solved. But scheduling of appointments, because how is that work largely done in the US? Like we've got carriers in the room, I'm sure. It is like manual, right? So if you work for a carrier, you're on the phone, or in best case, you're going into the computer. It's kind of like open table, right? I'm trying to find my reservation. I'm making it for Friday night. It's not there, so I'm going to try for Saturday. No, it's too late for Saturday, so I can get a reservation at my restaurant on Tuesday because nobody else is there. That's kind of how the planning for appointments works, and that's what his name was Dr. David Carell. That's what he concluded was it was the scheduling methodology, and we found it to be true for us. Like appointments were on the wrong days. I got stacking of appointments. So like I would ship nothing on a lane Monday, Tuesday, and I'd want to ship 30 on Wednesday. It's just crazy. And it's all because of this archaic scheduling process. We went out to try to find a technology solution to this and couldn't find it. We built one internally. And so we built this, so think hundreds of people servicing my business, doing this manual appointment scheduling. We built a tech that automates it, number one. So there's no humans involved, just a robot that uses machine learning, and it optimizes the way it schedules. So it uses all kinds of data inputs, and it's growing like what it uses. So traffic patterns, driver hour availability, even the complexity of an order. So, we were learning that certain orders would fail based on how complex they were. So how long does it take to pick, prepare the load, to stage it? We learned that we could predict how long it would take to do that well, and we should use the complexity of the load in the scheduling. So long story short, we built this technology that uses now about 2 dozen inputs into the machine learning brain, and then it schedules. It goes and gets the appointment at P&G, then it gets it at Walmart, and our on-time performance is above 98%. And in this industry, that's pretty darn good. And the average wait time for a driver on the P&G lot dropped by 75%. That's just one issue that's been there for decades in the transportation space. And there's a second I'm working on, I'll just share it, because if I think, what are the big problems facing transportation? 1, we waste driver time. 2, we don't fill the trucks. What's the average truck fill in the US? And I mean one that's like actually supposed to have stuff in it, not the one that's returning empty miles, but what's the average truck fill in the US? Does anybody know? Around 80% at best, right? And there's for lots of reasons, right? So first, we build the truck too small to start with. And I'll just give you one simple reason why. So on any given lane I could have multiple carriers on my tariff, right? Because I've got to have what we're calling optionality or whatever. Like we got to have options for carriers. It could have a day cab that has a lot of capacity or have an overnight cab, okay, with less capacity. And I have to build the master data for this thing. And so how do I build it? Like smallest common denominator. So if I have both on there, I assume it's going to be the overnight cab that's got less space. So I build it too small to start with if a day cab showed up. And then over time, we cut things off because product availability is not 100%. So we're building a tech that's, my best analogy is it's like a standby list for like an airplane, right? I just read another article today about how airlines are overbooking even more. It's kind of like that. So at any given point in the order process, I can put more things back on the truck to fill it up. And so we're doing a first pilot with Walmart as the customer. But those are 2 big problems that have faced the transportation industry for decades, and I still think there are huge opportunities out there.
It's interesting, too, on the scheduling piece that you mentioned. That is such a huge enabler for the recipient of the product, right? Because that's how they plan their manpower in the building based on what they have coming in and the volume. So it's surprising that that hasn't been addressed even before.
I completely agree. And so like this whole notion of, a batch plan, like we do it once per day, and that's it. Like we're moving into a world where it's continuous planning and using all the signals to change the plan, to disengage and re-engage multiple times. Mm-hmm. We've got to operate like that because, to your point, I can go, at least a year ago, before we executed this, I would go into one of my own DCs and I would see a dock door blocked, like I've staged something and the driver's not showing up. And that's lost capacity for that facility. And it could be lost for 3 days. We'd have issues where like a certain carrier wouldn't show up for days. Today, we're using all of that data. Increasingly, we're using more data to plan and replan to optimize and not lose that capacity.
Yeah, data is at the heart of everything that we need to do. So from our perspective, we work really hard to give data visibility to all of the different touches, the forecasting through the software that we provide as a part of being our customer. But yeah, to your point, it's the solve for everything. And I think about, Chris, our days back at Walmart, like data visibility historically has not been a huge force. Now it is with the company, but we've come a long way even with Walmart. I still refer to me as we. I can't knock that habit after being there for so long with the company, but it's amazing to see how even Walmart has really evolved into a very data-centric company.
Yeah, Cory, I think you hit the nail right on the head when you said drivers aren't, it's not a driver shortage, it's hour shortage. And I think, there is, I think that comes from an old infrastructure that we had for a very long time in this country of how we handle freight. I mean, you think about every real estate warehouse that's in the country right now. How is it outfitted? It's outfitted to rear load, right? We're going to load trailers in, we're going to load trailers out. And I have to give kudos to our innovation team at ArcBest. We just rolled out a I think, a game changer in that space, the Vox mobile platform that actually allows you to unload that whole trailer in a matter of minutes, but not only unload it, but load it. So that what you were talking about in terms of like utilizing space, minimizing the hours of waiting for drivers, all those things are addressed. And it's kind of that out-of-the-box thinking that we're starting to see in the supply chain space, I think mainly and a lot because of what happened in the last 3 years, that we have to think of things differently. And so this system and it can be integrated with WMSs to where what you're talking about, you're loading that platform. That platform is at 80%, and you know that it's only at 80%, and you can look back into your WMS and see what else needs to be filled before the truck ever even arrives. So those are some, I think, game changers that we have to start thinking about in the industry. Use what we have, because trying to change every warehouse in the country would probably be, take forever. But ultimately, we can think outside the box and use this innovation to address things like driver shortage and cube capacity.
And Jennifer, you talked about quality and visibility and I know Cory and I have talked about the pendulum swinging, right? We go from one side to the other side. And is it going to swing back? Is it going to be, are we going to lose this activity we have going on right now?
Yeah, so from a quality perspective and a compliance perspective, I don't know that we have a choice, right? We have to continue with that momentum because the standards are set. The retailers have very strongly set the standards and the expectations. I think for myself, being in the middle, it's important for us to figure out creative ways to, on behalf, at least in our business, on behalf of our customers, how to mitigate those. We've stood up a compliance team internally where we can try and work through every single touch point in the building to have inspections and really work to mitigate those fines. But just to simply state, there is no choice but to continue to control that quality and compliance aspect, simply because the demands and the expectations are there. Because now fines hit us in our pocket, right? They hit us through fines, and so. Yeah, we have no choice but to control those.
Any thoughts on the portfolio from your side, Cory? Will it go back?
I think, again, as a really large consumer products company who hopes to improve the life of consumers around the world, we're always going to be innovating, coming out with new items. You all know, I'm sure almost everybody in here has a P&G product in its home, in your home. That's the lifeblood of the company. But I do think that, the days of SKUs for news, I think is maybe over. And I think we will streamline. The digital experience has changed everything. So, on the shelf, I may have, we're talking a lot of, I don't know why, there's a lot of shampoo today, but we may have 500 SKUs of shampoo. Who in here scrolls down to the 25th page on any retailer's website to find something? You're not searching that far. So it's we're seeing a concentration of volume on the top SKUs, unlike we've ever seen before, because that's the digital experience. So the long tail has become less productive than ever before. So I do think that we'll see some streamlining because of it. And I think that for those things that exist for a specific reason on that tail, I think the way it's fulfilled will be dramatically different. We're not going to carry it in 4,700 stores or in FCs. I may have one node in my supply chain and I ship on behalf of everybody. So I think both the streamlining of the portfolio and then being very specific with the way we service that to the consumer has changed forever. I don't think it goes back.
I agree. And then John, you're running innovation for top transportation. Is the innovation spend going to continue to be funneled? Or how do you see that evolving over the future?
Yeah, I think it definitely is. Daily, I'm getting asked by clients to help them become more and more efficient in what they have to do at the moment. So we plan, we forecast, we look at all of those pieces, but then it comes down to the day that it actually has to move and ship. And what are we doing in that space to be agile, So when we planned it to be a truckload, but none of those SKUs ended up showing up, do we still let it go as a truckload because it's a static environment and we're not going to move from that? Or do we have the ability and the technology to pivot quickly and move that out of that environment? And that's where a lot of shippers are seeing some inefficiencies that are costing them. I think someone mentioned earlier that it's not a logistics problem when you're having to ship that way. So you're going to a carrier and asking them to reduce the mileage rate, but miles are miles. You're not going to change that.
Right.
But maybe what needs to be changed is raising that cube capacity from 60 on that shipment to 98. How do you do that? Through technology. How do you do that with having the agility, built into your system to do it at the time you ship, not just at the time you're planning?
So it's interesting. I'd like to add too, because each piece that everybody has is very dependent on a precision, and the requirement to have this precise way of handling your piece of it and handling the product side of it as well. And then, of course, obviously the quality and compliance piece, but just kind of rings true to me how each touch within the supply chain has got to really act in a very precise way, where we control loss, eliminate rework, touch things right the first time and deal with it right the first time, instead of allowing the waste to slip into each one of our areas.
Yeah, and seeing that collaboration across those different, not just internal cross-functional teams, but now different pieces. And we see that a lot too. We have to collaborate with the warehouse. We have to collaborate with the shipper. We have to collaborate with the carrier partners. All of those things at one time. And like you said, they have to be precise and you have to get the right information. But if you're not collaborating, if you don't know what the other party needs, if you don't know what they're looking for, then a lot of times you miss the mark.
All right, here's a question that we didn't talk about beforehand, so you're going to have to wing it. But I was thinking earlier today when somebody asked who has talent challenges, everybody's hands went up. So you guys get to talk to a ton of talent. I mean, you were in the middle of some of those meetings. Give us some thoughts when you think about the talent challenges around this space.
First of all, let me just put the plug in for the University of Arkansas. So, Donnie, I met you, I don't know if it was probably about 5 years ago. And we went out early. I was new to this area, and I was talking about talent and challenges. And at that time, I wanted to completely reinvent my organization, right? So the vision I had, some of the technology I just described, I didn't have what I needed to bring any of that to life. And one of the first things I did was reach out to Donnie, where we met, and we started talking about how do we bring talent, top talent from University of Arkansas to P&G, and we have. And just before I came, I reached out to my HR. I'm like, how many people have we hired, either full-time or HR, just in 3 years? And it's 24 students from the University of Arkansas in our program. So just huge, and I'm a big fan of that. I'm sure you can see, in my DNA, I love to break things. I love to understand the big problems facing supply, and I want to go break those things. And I need innovators on the team, right? And I need people who are entrepreneurs at heart. I mean, it's kind of weird to think about bringing an entrepreneur when we're a $70 billion company, but that's what I'm looking for. I want entrepreneurs who are digitally native, who also like to break things. I haven't had a hard time finding those people, and I've found a lot of them locally. I mean, so that's really my story. It's I'm not having a problem. The problem was me to articulate the vision and get my company alignment and build the relationships with the university, and we've been hugely successful. So I don't have a problem. It's more the vision than anything.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. I'm kind of in the same boat. Just recently, so when I started with RJW back in September, Bill and I were a mighty team of two, and we've kind of expanded and grown somewhat, have 3 new managers that have come under our team, as well as 10 hourly associates kind of working through that compliance piece of it. But I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Haven't had a trouble getting good talent to come in. When you come in with a compliance nature, typically it's working through the change management and the operation and getting everyone else on board and really trying to get everyone on the same page. So that's probably where we're at, just because we're brand new. So
It's an interesting question. I think back, many years ago when I first got into transportation, it wasn't, I don't know, I guess it wasn't like a sexy type of career to get into. It was, you told people you were in transportation or trucking, and they were like, oh, where do you drive to? So it's changed since then a lot, and there's a lot of talent out there, and they're interested in getting into transportation. They're interested in getting into supply chain, and even I think more now than ever, because all of a sudden it became real upfront and personal in the last 3 years that this could be something that I could actually have a change in my career. This is part of my purpose in life. I could actually help do these things, and so I'm encouraged. We have a great partnership with U of A. We have a great partnership with many of the universities in the state, and we do try to recruit locally, and it is different, I will say, moving into Arkansas. I mean, you have so many logistics companies and providers in this area that is very concentrated. So you have a lot of folk in supply chain, and you have a lot of focus in that area that I'm not used to. So that's also nice and refreshing. But I think that just gets better, and I'm encouraged by the amount of young people that are actually trying to solve these supply chain problems through innovation and technology, things that when I was younger, I would say, why am I doing this? This is so, this doesn't make sense. And we're starting to see some of those things being addressed.
All right, in the spirit of other panels, we're going to open it up for Q&A. There you go. So, okay, we have way in the back. Donnie, can you? Here you go. Now that you take over my job, you get.
Where are you at? Who had it? Oh, Mary?
Hi, this question is more directed at Cory Knox, and I know we're at the Plug and Play supply chain event where we're talking about companies partnering with startups. And so you said that you built some solutions to help with the supply chain. What was P&G's motivation to do it in-house rather than outsource?
If I'm being honest, I couldn't find it, right? And I mean, that's the answer to the question. So I reached out to some that I knew. By the way, we've got, we do have an internal group within our company that kind of acts as a startup. Like, we move fast, they have funding, we pitch ideas. It operates very similarly. But we went outside very quickly, and we couldn't find anything that would move fast enough. And I wanted a solution within like 3 months. What would it take to start automating part of this process? It's the kind of thing I'd love to partner with startups to solve, and there's still plenty more problems to solve, as I was mentioning another one on like just filling trucks more. But in that case, I could move faster internally.
Josh is getting a question.
Hey, Cory, we met earlier, Josh from Plug and Play. From the sales and marketing collaboration and partnership, I want to talk about the tail for a second. So when I was on the sales side of it, I needed my 77th variant of this because there was something special about it, and if they didn't buy it, we had to go to a competitive brand. As you're talking about the tail and optimization, what are you seeing from your partners in the other functions around supporting that? Maybe if I don't have this, I'll lose share of shelf at customer retailer A. Everybody's got to work together to address the inventory and supply chain, marketing, and sales. I was curious to some of the feedback that you could provide on that.
I think the attitudes about that are shifting very rapidly. And you're right, like, that's the conversation. It's me with my marketing friends and my sales friends, et cetera. The attitude's changing very rapidly because of digital commerce, right? And so, what are we trying to solve for? Do we think that there's a competitive, like, what is it? Like, I'm going to lose shelf space, or like, what is the thing? by the way, a lot of those decisions are going to be made for us. So if we're not proactive in a database way, I believe retailers will make that decision. And I've been engaged in a lot of those conversations, right? So, the way we think about holding power at the shelf has changed dramatically. I'm not just servicing the in-store purchase, I'm servicing the digital purchase, and I may need much more holding power on my top SKUs in that environment, which is what we're seeing, by the way, because we see it in the sales data, versus before. We're seeing, if I go online, I can't find that thing and it's out of stock, that's a really bad situation. It's worse than it is in store. I will choose a thing right next to it that looks very similar. My point is, the conversations now are about Omni. It's the holistic. What is the right portfolio to service, not only in store, but online, with a great consumer experience where they get it every single time? The biggest, I'll just say it like this. So it's getting much better, but the challenge for us and the other company is, if we're going to streamline the portfolio, it's got to be enterprise-wide. Like, the thing that cannot happen is that I've got 5 lists of items here locally with this retailer that've got to remain, and then I've got a different 5 that have to remain at that one in Minneapolis, and another 5 that have to remain in Seattle. We're having to consolidate the entire thing and streamline the portfolio for the all customers. But again, just to say it again, I think it's evolving because we're really thinking about the Omni experience, and we're getting so much data now. I mean, who subscribes to Illuminate data, and who's done data mining on that? We're seeing it play out. Like, the decision will be made for us, and I'm getting less pushback than ever before on streamlining.
You are making me run today.
Thank you. I guess we're picking on Cory here. With that program of the scheduling, what happens in situations where Murphy's Law hits, where there's a traffic accident, it slows down the driver, or the driver's truck breaks down, where he misses that schedule? Does your system handle that type of scenario? Because we had a recent situation, truck broke down, and it took 2 more days to get an appointment at a particular retailer, which talks about the lack of using the drivers to the optimal.
Absolutely. Yeah, so phase 1 of the project, that's what I call the project, and we have a code name for it, but phase 1 was just doing the initial scheduling. Let's get it the best we can, the most highest probability plan to deliver on time and at the lowest fulfillment cost. Phase 2, and I just alluded to it, but we're doing the work now, and it's just how much data are we bringing in, and that is the continuous rescheduling, right? And so, like, I know today I've heard Project 44 and 4 kites. We've got all that. It's included. All right, we're including a number of different factors, including like loading status. It's important for us to know we have a plan or unloading status. If a Walmart DC is loading behind, that's data that's being ingested into this, and we will cancel an appointment there. If I know the truck's not going to be unloaded and I can't pick up an empty on the way back out, we will cancel that appointment and reschedule. My point is, step 1 was optimize the initial schedule. Step 2 is the continuous planning aspect of it that we're putting in. And I said engage, re-engage, so canceling, rescheduling appointments based on the most up-to-date data. There are thresholds. I don't reschedule everything. There are certain cases where, okay, it's going to be 2 hours late, and I'll take that miss. But if I got data, like you said, 2 days, if I have data that says I can't reschedule for 2 days, I'm canceling everything. I can't afford to have block capacity at my site or at Walmart's site, so we will cancel and replan. In an automated way. It's not a human canceling thing. It's a machine canceling and rescheduling.
John, do you have any comments on that last subject? Because that certainly impacts you guys as well.
Yeah, I mean,
And Jennifer, for that matter.
the canceling, the canceling of appointments, rescheduling of appointments. Everything that we're doing right now is basically supportive of that. We're not running any kind of AI that is looking at that, but it's definitely across all customers, not even just retail, but all customers that are needing that kind of activity. I mean, you have to have good data that's coming in from the carriers. That's probably one of the biggest challenges. I would love to see more standardization across carriers of all modes, because you have truckload carriers that give certain statuses and information that is very detailed and very accurate. You have some LTL carriers that can, but then some that cannot. And so trying to roll that all up into one system to make an accurate target can be a challenge. There's, at this point in the I say in our current state, there's got to be some manual intervention to get it to be accurate. But I could see hopefully in the future we can consume better data.
Yeah, and what I heard too was complete visibility, right? So you also have to have visibility that that warehouse is behind. So it kind of goes both ways, right? So it's the seamless visibility at all of the touches throughout the supply chain going both ways, not just what you're handling in your piece of it, very siloed, but instead understanding this particular warehouse is 2 days out and having that. I don't feel like we're there yet where that complete visibility is all the way across, no matter the retailer. So that's a gap as well.
Agreed. And that kind of takes me down to my last question, and maybe you'll be off of that, but what's most encouraging to you as you look to the future of this omni-channel demand logistics?
I think the pace of innovation is unlike ever before, and it's super exciting just to hear all the things we're hearing today. And I think as a supply chain professional, what excites me is, I think Rod said it, like we're going to play a totally different role, an expanded role going forward. We're already doing some of it, where roles that would have traditionally been filled by somebody with, a sales or marketing background, we're filling roles with supply chain, because it's that supply chain master. Even from a retail media network, we're talking about that. Like my knowing of all the things in the supply chain, that's what I'm trying to coordinate through this. I'm just excited that those with supply chain backgrounds are going to play an increasing role in the overall enterprise.
So I'll give you two perspectives. So I'll give you my personal shopper perspective. I love it, right? Who's not an online shopper these days? I'm an online shopper that not a day just about goes by that I don't have some sort of package showing up. So I love the flexibility of if a shelf is empty, I can hop on my phone and have it sometimes same day, other times I can have it tomorrow. From a supply chain professional, to your point, it challenges us to consistently be nimble and to think outside the box on solutions to get our packages there. Are we there yet? We're evolving, and so there's still room to grow, I think, to absolutely nail it.
Yeah, I'm most encouraged, I think, with just the challenge currently to the status quo. And I heard a lot of different cases today of different things that could be solved and are being solved. And they're in all different spaces. And it's particularly to me, because it's close to me, in the transportation space, just to see the amount of innovation that's happening, whether it's on the physical side, the technology side, at the carrier level. There's things that I think that have just gone on far too long in our industry that we've just accepted, or we've put Band-Aids over with people and resource, that we're starting to see, hey, we have the ability to solve this through technology. We have the ability to change the process, and I'm a big fan of changing processes if they need to be changed, or asking why we're still doing something after a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And I think we haven't done that enough on the delivery side of the supply chain. And a lot of it has to do, I think, with some carrier enhancements that can be done. So I think talking and connecting, that's what I heard today, is a lot of the carriers don't have a lot of that information, or the warehouses don't have a lot of information that the carriers have. We all got that information during the last 2 years because everybody was talking. I can't pick up your freight. I can't deliver your freight. I can't I can't receive it into the warehouse. I don't have labor. So now that we're all talking, I think I'm most encouraged that we have a group of people that are interested in finding solutions and trying to really change supply chain for the better.
Yeah, because we're really good at, supply chain holistically is really good about muscling through. I mean, we're going to make it happen one way or the other, right? But I think at the heart of what you're saying is let's get to the root of it and let's fix the root of it and make it be much more streamlined day in and day out versus this firefighting mode that we consistently can find ourselves in.
Thank you guys so much for doing this. Jennifer, as a shopper, I'm one of the few guys that gets drone deliveries to my yard. So when you get that, it's super fun. 30 minutes after I place an order, a drone drops my package in my backyard. And so we're just getting started on the fun stuff. So thank you guys for doing this. Thank you guys for participating.